senior welding inspectors welding in accordance with the requirements of BSE and ISO 17637 2016. Forward. The certification scheme for personnel CSWIP is a comprehensive scheme which provides for the examination and certification of individuals seeking to demonstrate their knowledge and or competence in their field of operation. The scope of CSWIP includes, among others, welding inspectors, welding supervisors, welding instructors, welding examiners, welding quality control coordinators, heat treatment operatives, cathode inspection personnel, plant inspectors, underwater inspectors, plastics welders, and NDT personnel. CSWIP is managed by the Certification Management Board, which acts as the governing board for certification in keeping with the requirements of the industries served by the scheme. The Certification Management Board in turn appoints specialist management committees to oversee specific parts of the scheme. All CSWIP boards and committees comprise member representatives of relevant industrial and other interests. TWI Certification Limited is accredited by OCAS to BSE and ISO IES 17024 for certification of personnel. TWI Certification Limited understands the importance of impartiality in carrying out its certification activities, managing conflict of interest, and ensuring the objectivity of all its certification activities in accordance with BSE and ISO IEC 17024. The current document covers the certification of visual welding inspectors, and senior welding inspectors. There are two categories of senior welding inspectors, one with radiographic interpretation and without. The requirements governing registration of visual welding inspectors, and senior welding inspectors are detailed in separate documents CSWIP WI 191 Part 1 and Part 2. Success in the appropriate CSWIP certification examination is one of the prerequisites of registration. Registration is strongly recommended as it helps to satisfy the CSWIP certificate renewal requirements as see clause 4.5.1. Access to certification. Access to certification scheme is not improperly restricted. The sole criteria for certification are given in the document, and any subsequent amendments and no other criteria will be applied. Certification is not conditional on the candidate applying for other services or membership from TWI Certification Limited, its parent, or any other groups or associations. General scope. This document prescribes procedures by which personnel may be examined, and if successful candidates for their duties of visual welding inspector, or senior welding inspector as defined in clause 1.2. This document does not purport to cover personnel who do not have the responsibility defined in clause 1.2. The examination are primarily intended for fuel welded steel construction, but endorsements are available for other material groups. There are recognition arrangements between TWI Certification Limited and other welding inspector certification schemes, detail of which can be found at www.cswip.com. This scheme is not normally intended to apply to engineers or engineering surveyors concerned with the total certification of the plant. Responsibilities of personnel. Typical areas of work activity of personnel for whom CSWIP welding inspector certifications would be suitable are given below. Visual welding inspectors. Post-weld visual inspection and dimensional check of completed weld against specification requirements and drawings, and under the supervision of a welding inspector or senior welding inspector. Establish the most suitable welding processes, codes and standards, application of the requirements of code and standards, parent material identity, verification against documentation and marking of correctness of parent material, welding consumables identity, verification of correctness of welding consumables, electrodes, fluorides, consumable and inserts, gases, fluxes, etc. Pre-weld inspection. Verification that dimensions, fit up, and weld preparations are in accordance with the engineering drawings. Preheating. Verification the preheat where required is the accordance with specified dock procedures. In process, welding surveillance. Surveillance during welding to verify compliance with specified procedure including any preheat interpost temperature control and post-heat treatments. Welding inspectors, those given visual welding inspector plus supervision of visual welding inspectors in the conduct of activities B to H above. Welding procedures, establishing that a procedure is available has been approved as required by the appropriate authority and is being applied in production. Witnessing of welder and procedure approval tests, witnessing the preparation of test pieces and destructive tests, and verifying compliance with appropriate standards and specifications. Welder approvals, verification that adequate and valid welder approval are available and that only approved welders are required are used in production. Post-weld heat treatment, verification that post-weld heat treatment has been conducted in accordance with the specification requirements. Reports, preparation of inspection reports. Senior welding inspectors, those given visual welding inspectors and welding inspector plus supervision of welding inspectors and visual welding inspectors in the conduct of activities due to M above as appropriate. Certification of compliance, final acceptance and certification that the requirements of the specification have been met. Welding drawings, interpretation of weld drawings and weld symbols. Records, maintenance of comprehensive inspection records. Weld defects, identification of weld defects and determination of their acceptability in relation to the written specification. NDT results, verification of NDT reports on welding work of which the senior welding inspector is responsible. This may include radiography interpretation. Quality assurance, ensuring that quality assurance standards and procedures are maintained. Requirements prior to taking a certification test. Job responsibilities and experience criteria for examination eligibility as given below are strictly adhered to and enforced. Visual welding inspector. Although there is no specific experience requirement, it is recommended that candidates possess a minimum of 6 months welding related engineering experience and 2 years industrial experience. In addition, candidates must comply with clause 1.3.4. Welding inspector. A minimum of 3 years welding inspection experience related to the duties and responsibility listed in clause 1.2.1 and clause 1.2.2 under qualified supervision independently verified, or CSWIP visual welding inspector for a minimum of 2 years with job responsibilities in the areas listed in 1.2.1 and 1.2.2 above, or CSWIP welding instructor or CSWIP welding foreman supervisor for a minimum of 1 year. In addition to all of the above, candidate must comply with clause 1.3.4. Senior welding inspector. CSWIP welding inspector for a minimum of 2 years with job responsibilities in the area listed in 1.2.1, 1.2.2 and 1.2.3 above, or 5 years authenticated welding inspection experience related to the duties and responsibility listed in clause 1.2.1, 1.2.2 and 1.2.3 independently verified. In addition to the above, candidate must comply with clause 1.3.4. Training. All candidates with the exception of mature candidates, see section 1.4, must attend a CSWIP approved course of training at the appropriate level prior to examination. Details of such courses are available on request from www.twitraining.com. Health, eyesight. Candidates need to be in satisfactory physical condition and the person completing the application form will be required to signify that the candidate's health and eyesight are adequate to enable him/her to carry out his/her duties. An eyesight test certificate must be submitted with the application form issued by a medically recognized person to provide proof to near visual acuity unaided, corrected in at least one eye, such that the candidate is capable of reading Time Roman N5 fonts or Jaeger number 1 fonts or equivalent sized letters. These letters shall have a height of 1.6 mm at a distance of not less than 30 cm with one or both eyes on a standard reading test chart. Mature candidate road offering exemption from formal training is available for the following: visual welding inspector, candidates who are able to demonstrate at least 10 years recent continuous experience in visual welding inspection duties as indicated in clause 1.2.1 under qualified supervision independently verified. Welding inspector, candidates who are able to demonstrate at least 10 years recent continuous experience in welding inspection duties as indicated in clause 1.2.1 and 1.2.2 under qualified supervision independently verified, or candidates who hold an international welding inspector basic level diploma with 2 years recent continuous experience in welding inspection duties as indicated in clause 1.2.1 and 1.2.2 under qualified supervision independently verified. Senior welding inspector, candidates who hold an international welding inspector standard level diploma with 2 years recent continuous experience in senior welding inspection duties as indicated in clause 1.2.1, 1.2.2 and 1.2.3 independently verified. Examination procedure. Visual welding inspector. The examination procedure for the visual welding inspector consists of a practical examination only, and a candidate must satisfy the examiner in all parts. See 2.2.2a. Details of the examination format and syllabus are given in Appendix 1. Appendix 1, Examination Syllabus. Visual Welding Inspector Examination Format. Practical Part A1, inspection of a plate butt weld examination object or 8 examination specimens to a code provided by the test center. Test time allowed 2 hours. Practical Part B1, inspection of a T-joint filler weld not fractured to a code provided by the test center. Time allowed 30 minutes. For marks for all parts is 70%. Subject: candidates will be expected to have a knowledge of codes and standards. The makeup of typical application standards. Terminology: weld, joints, weld face, toe, root, throat, leg length, has, fusion boundary, terminology of defects. Materials: inspection points, size, thickness, lengths, diameters, type, grade, composition against documentation, condition, cleanness, and surface for welding. Heat treatment, condition, and distortion. Welding processes, basic features of manual and mechanized flux shielded and gas shielded arc process, gas welding, and electroslag welding. The identification of weld defects due to misuse of malfunction of processes. Consumables. The identification of consumables to British, European, ISO, and American standards. Coating types and fluxes, shielding gas compositions, electrode and filler wire compositions. The storage and drying of electrodes and fluxes, matching consumables, electrodes with shielding gases, electrodes with fluxes. Visual examination and dimensional checking before and after welding. Weld preparation and fit up, dimensions and shape of finished weld, defects, code requirements. Identification of preheat, application and control, safety, health and safety requirements and practices. Visual examination of required repaired welds, partially removed welds and completed removed welds. Welding inspector. The examination procedure for the welding inspector consists of written and practical examination. Please refer to Appendix 1 and 2 respectively for details of the examination format syllabus. Written examination. The written examination consists of multiple choice questions and are designed to test the candidate's knowledge of the syllabus. Practical examination. Candidates will be required to inspect and report on the following: 2 examination object or 8 examination specimens, and in addition for the welding inspector grade only, a set of descriptive tests, 2 macros or 2 bends or 2 fractured fillets, for a welder or a web procedure approval test intended to comply with a stated specification. Examination format: Theory Part A2, General Welding Theory, Product Technology, and NDT 30 multiple choice question, time allowed 45 minutes. Theory Part B2, specific welding technology, 60 multiple choice questions, time allowed 1 hour 30 minutes. Practical Part A2, inspection of a plate butt weld, examination object and a pipe butt weld, examination object or 8 examination specimen to a code provided by the code test center, time allowed 1 hour 30 minutes. Practical Part C2, inspection of a set of destructive test samples to a code provided by the test center, 2 macros, 2 bends or 2 fractures, time allowed 45 minutes. Pass marks for all parts is 70%. Subjects: candidates will need to demonstrate knowledge of the visual welding inspector syllabus plus materials, size, thickness, length, diameters, type, grade, composition against documentation, condition, cleanness and surface of for welding, heat treatment condition and distortion. The effect of composition, thickness, and hydrogen on welding of certain grades of steel, the techniques and control used to avoid hydrogen-induced cracking and lamellar tear. Post-weld heat treatment is conducted and controlled. Welding processes, the effect of variation in welding parameters, the influence of process on appearance and penetration, and centerline cracking. British American ISO symbol on drawings. Welding procedures and welder approvals and their control. The essential features of a procedure: British, European, American, and other systems of procedure and welder approval and appropriate documentation. Quality control of welding. The implementation of quality controls and in-process inspection, organization, and records. Destructive test. The selection and purpose of all destructive tests specific in standards, assessments of results. Non-destructive testing: the methods, capabilities, and limitations, and assessments of reports related to penetrant, magnetic particle, radiographic, and ultrasonic testing of parent materials and weld joints. Weld defects: identification of defects, reasons for their occurrence, and acceptance. Distortion: the influence of welding technique on distortion, the control of distortion, the influence of heat treatment and machining. Reporting: the preparation of technical reports on all aspects of inspection referred to above. Senior Welding Inspector 3.2.1. Candidates who do not already hold a valid CSWIP welding inspector certificate must also complete the full welding inspector examination, including mature candidates, in addition to the procedure outlined below. Written examination. The written examinations consist of multi-choice questions and are designed to test the candidate's knowledge of the syllabus. Practical examination. Candidates will be required to scrutinize 4 inspection-related documents, scrutinize and interpret fabrication drawings, answer multiple-choice questions based on TWI specification. Senior Welding Inspector 3.2.1. Examination format. Candidates who do not already hold a CSWIP welding inspection certificate must also complete the full welding inspector examination in addition to the procedure outlined below. Theory Part A3, General Welding Theory, Product Technology and NDT, 3 multiple choice questions, time allowed 45 minutes. Practical Part B1, scrutinize and comment on 4 inspection related documents, 40 multiple choice questions, time allowed for 75 minutes. Practical Part C3, scrutiny and interpretation of a welding inspection drawing, 10 multiple choice questions, time allowed 20 minutes. Practical Part D3, TWI specification, 60 multiple choice questions, time allowed 90 minutes. Pass marks for all parts is 70%. Subjects: candidates will need to demonstrate a knowledge of the visual welding inspector and welding inspector syllabus given in more detail above, plus supervision of welding inspectors and record keeping, supervisory techniques and the duties of supervisor, including comprehensive record keeping, certification of compliance, requirements of typical contract codes and specifications. NDT, factors affecting and detectability of weld defects by the various NDT methods, A detailed knowledge of verification of entity results and reports for conventional volumetric and surface methods. Weld drawings. The understanding and interpretation of weld drawings, quality assurance and quality control procedures and their implementation. Supplementary radiography interpretation. Candidates who hold a valid senior welding inspector 3.2.1 may at any time during the life cycle of this certification take the radiography interpreter supplementary examination to gain the 3.2.2 senior welding inspector. Written examination. The written examination consists of multiple choice questions and is designed to test the candidate's knowledge of the syllabus. Practical examination. Candidates are required to conduct 5 density readings and answer 5 sensitometry questions. As a minimum, interpret 6 radiographs from group A. If additional groups are required, then candidates must interpret 3 radiographs for each additional group. Radiographic interpretation supplementary examination format. Theory part D3. Standard radiography interpretation option. Nature and properties of X and gamma radiation. Photographic aspects. Fundamental aspects of radiography. Quality. Geometry of image formation. Interpretation. 20 multi-choice questions. Time allowed 30 minutes. Practical part D3. Radiography interpretation. Certification is allowed in a number of combination of metal groups. Group A. Ferritic steel including clad steels, metal arc, TIG and mechanized fusion welding, oxyacetylene welding mandatory. Group B. Austenitic steels and high nickel alloys excluding manual metal arc, TIG and mechanized fusion welding, titanium alloys, inert gas welding optional. Group C. Aluminium and its alloy, MIG and TIG welding, magnesium and its alloys, TIG welding optional. Group D. Copper and its alloys and manual metal arc, MIG and TIG welding optional. In each case, 6 radiographs must be interpreted for group A plus 3 radiographs each of any additional groups. Time allowed is 15 minutes per radiograph. Candidate also required to conduct 5 density readings and answer 5 sensitometry questions. Additional examination may be taken at any time to expand the number of group hold. Pass marks for all parts is 70%. Subjects. Radiography interpretation. Interpretation of weld radiographs in accordance with the radiographic interpreter's weld syllabus. See Appendix 3. Appendix 2. Radiographic interpreter weld syllabus theory. Nature and properties of X or gamma radiations. Penetration, absorption, scatter, diffraction, transmission, rectilinear propagation. Photographic properties. Photographic aspects, darkroom procedures, layout, light traps and entrance, wet and dry benches, film pass hatches, processing units, safe lights and ancillary equipment, handling and processing of films, temperature control, sensitivimetry, type film and paper used in industrial radiography, characteristic curves, speed, contrast, definition, density, fog, graininess, inherent sharpness, latitude, commercial films and their properties. The use of screens. Spurious indications, light and safe light, fogging, chemical fog, strains, air bubbles, reticulation, pressure marks, static marks, drying marks, finger marks, defective screens, incomplete fixing, film manufacturing faults. Fundamental aspects of radiographic quality. Quality of radiation, optimum work and densities, radiographic contrast, objective and subjective contrast, methods of controlling radiographic contrast, effect of scattered radiation, use of filters, screens, masking and blocking media, influence of processing conditions and view condition on contrast. Radiographic definition, objective and objective, unsharpness, geometric unsharpness, interrelationship of dimensions of focal spot of source, focus source, objective and focus source, film distances, inherent unsharpness, movement, film screen contrast, the summation of factors controlling definition, control of radiographic sensitivity and its assessment by the use of image indicators. X-ray and gamma ray equipment, a knowledge of the effect on radiographic quality in the event of equipment change, geometry of image formation, control of focus source, object distance, object, film distance focus source, film distance, selection of beam angle, exposure calculation, effect of distance on exposure, use of exposure chart and calculation for X and gamma radiography. Application to welds, interpretation of radiographs in steel plate and circumferential butt joints in steel pipe, welds in aluminum, welds in copper and its alloys, welds in small bore tubes, the determination of the depth of a flaw from one surface in a specimen by the practical use of the tube or source shift method. Viewing of radiographs. Optimum viewing conditions, checking for acceptable density, contrast and freedom from spurious. Indications analysis the loss of sensitivity in order to rectify faulty techniques. Welding technology, terminology for welds, weld joints, welding procedures, weld defects, parent metal defects, influence on techniques of geometry, size, surface condition, parent metal composition, weld metal structure, influence of surface cladding, heat treatments and weld repairs. Basic principles of fusion welding processes. Type of defect associated with particular parent metal welding processes combination. Types of defect in welds and parent metals defectable by in ultrasonic. Defect parameters which influence detectability, e.g. size, geometry, distance from surface, orientation, reflectivity and opacity. Practical. In the practical part, the candidate is firstly required to carry out a number of sensitivity calculations using DIMSME and BSIQIS and to establish the accuracy of a density meter using a density strip. Secondly, the candidate is required to interpret a number of radiographs of welds. For each radiograph, the candidate is required to locate and identify defects and to evaluate the correct radiographic procedure. Application for examination and fees. Candidates will be required to submit an application form. All the information requested must be on the forms. No applications can be considered confirmed until the receipt of correctly completed documents. Application forms ask for specific details of experience and training and must be signed to the effect that these details are correct. In the event of a false statement being discovered on forms, any examination undertaken will be declared null and void. A certification is automatically invalidated if there are any outstanding examination fees in respect of that certificate. Candidates proved to have cheated or found to have attempted to remove or found to have removed examination material in a CSWIP examination will not be accepted as a candidate for any CSWIP examination for a minimum period of 5 years from the date of the examination where cheating, attempt to remove or removal of examination material was established to have taken place. Examinations may be taken at any one of number of test centers in the UK and overseas. Lists are available on request. Categories of certification. Candidates may apply for one of the following certification categories: 3.0 Visual Welding Inspector, 3.1 Welding Inspector, 3.2.1 Senior Welding Inspector without Radiographic Interpretation, 3.2.2 Senior Welding Inspector with Radiographic Interpretation. Note: Senior Welding Inspector certificates will contain no reference to any NDT certification unless the radiography interpreter supplement is taken. Certification result notice. All candidates will be sent a result notice. That this notice will be also be sent to the organization paying the examination fee if not paid by the candidate. Successful candidates. 2 copies of certificates of proficiency will be issued to the organization or person that pays the examination fees. Duplicate certification to replace those lost or destroyed will be issued only after extensive inquiries. Unsuccessful candidates. Candidates who fail to obtain a certificate any attempt one retest on those parts of the examination in which success was not achieved. That retest must be completed within 1 year of the initial examination. Otherwise, candidates will have to repeat the complete examination. The request or complete re-examination may not be taken with 30 days of the previous examination unless additional approved training is undertaken before taking the retest. Candidates who are successful in the retest will be required to retake the full approved course followed by the full examination. If a candidate fails a practical part of the welding inspector examination, they are allowed a second retest on the part if they have 1 day's approved training before taking the second retest. This option only applies to candidates who have taken the full CSWIP approved course of training in accordance with section 1.3.4, and the second retest must be taken within 1 year of the initial examination. No an extra time will be given under any circumstances for a second retest. Period of validity. The candidate is valid for 5 years from the date of completion of the initial examination and may be renewed for a further 5 years on application, provided evidence is produced in accordance with clause 4.5.1. Certificates are only valid provided they are within date. They are on standard cream CSWIP paper bearing the CSWIP logo in black on gold, signed by an officer of CSWIP and embossed with the CSWIP stamp. They have been signed by the individual to whom the certificate is awarded, and they are accompanied by a valid official CSWIP identity card. Photocopies are unauthorized by CSWIP and should only be used for internal administrative purposes. Renewal. 5-year renewal. In order for certificate to be renewed after 5 years, the holder has to demonstrate that he/she has maintained his/her competence by providing evidence of continuous work activity in welding inspection and providing evidence that the holder has kept up to date in welding technology. As a guide, reasonable continuity in any given 5-year period means that absences from work for which the certificate was granted should not exceed 1 year in one or several periods. One way of satisfying part 2 is by registration. See document CSWIP WI 191 part 1 can be satisfied by submitting a logo sheet of relevant work activity covering the period of validity of the certificate. Requests for the appropriate documentation should be sent to TWI certification contact. Details are provided at the end of the document. The certificate will not be renewed without further test if substantiated complaint is notified by the government board during the period of its validity. Further instructed and retest may then be required. Renewal must take place not later than 21 days after the date of expiry. It is certificate holder responsibility to ensure that renewal takes place at the appropriate time. Only under extreme circumstances will certificates be renewed up to maximum of 6 calendar months from the date of expiry shown on the certificate, and late renewal will be subject to a special fee. Candidates who do not renew or cannot provide verified evidence of work activity will be required to undertake an examination as directed by the certification body. 10-year recertification. Certificates are renewed beyond 10 years from the initial examination or from a previous 10-year recertification by the holder successfully completing a recertification examination prior to the expiry of the certificate. In addition to the renewal procedure given in clause 4.5.1, Request for the appropriate documentation should be sent to TWI Certification Limited. The 10-year examination for visual welding inspector will consist of a practical visual inspection of a plate butt weld examination object or 8 examination specimens. The 10-year examination for welding inspector and senior welding inspector 3.2.1 will consist of the following: multiple choice general paper, practical visual inspection of a plate butt weld examination object or 8 examination specimen. Note: to renew 3.2.2 senior welding inspector certificates, holders will in addition to be required to take the standard radiographic interpreter practical endorsement. One retest with 6 months of the 10-year renewal examination will be allowed. Failure by a visual welding inspector or welding inspector at the retest point will mean that the candidate must be the full course and successfully pass the full initial examination to regain the certification. Failure by a senior welding certificate at the retest point will mean that the candidate must successfully pass the full initial examination for welding inspector and then take the full course and successfully pass the examination for senior welding inspector. A 3.2.2 senior welding inspector who chooses not to take or who fails only the radiography interpreter renewal practical will be awarded a senior welding inspector 3.2.1 certificate. The full supplementary radiographic interpretation can be retaken at any time during the life of the 3.2.1 certificate. Complaints and appeals. An aggrieved party in a dispute which considers itself to have reasonable ground for questioning the competence of a CSWIP qualified person may petition the government board for non-renewal of the certificate. Such a petition must be accompanied by all relevant facts, and if in the opinion of the board an adequate case has been presented, a full investigation of the circumstances under dispute will be initiated. If the petition is substantiated or to the satisfaction of the board, the certification will not be renewed without further test. Appeals against failure to recertify or against non-renewal of the certificate may be made by the inspector or the employer upon application is writing to the governing board. Supplementary test. Senior welding inspector. Candidates for senior welding inspector who already possesses a valid CSWIP welding inspector certificate will be required to undertake a supplementary test consisting of all the parts listed in section 2.3. It is not recommended that a supplementary test be attempted during the 12 weeks immediately preceding the expiry date of an existing certificate, as failure could jeopardize renewal recertification of the CSWIP welding inspector. Certificate issue as a result of successful completion of the CSWIP senior welding inspector examination will supersede any previous CSWIP welding inspector certificate. Such certificates will be valid for 5 years from the date of the initial examination. Radiography interpretation. The supplementary radiographic interpretation may be taken as an option at the same time as the senior welding inspector examination or at any time later during the life of the certificate. Success in this supplementary examination does not extend the life of the certificate to which it is added. Records. TWI Certification Limited maintains records of successful and unsuccessful candidates. These records are accessible to the governing board or its nominees at all reasonable times. References. BSE and ISO 17637 2016 non-destructive testing of welds, visual testing of fusion welded joints.